on, Claire, spike the ball already.
Okay. Here it comes. Huh. Huh.
Summer's a good time to head outside, soak in the sun, and enjoy the festivities. As for me, I usually like to sit outside, grab an ice cream, and just watch the clouds pass by. I'm sure the rest of you are either having a barbecue, visiting an overpriced theme park,
Oh my god, he flew! No!
or enjoying the beach. I mean, it's better than staying indoors and watching YouTube reviews of movies, instead of, being inside of a packed movie theatre.
This is Running on Empty Food Review.
Aside from the outdoor activities, it's also the season of the summer blockbuster. As a young child of the 90s, it was always an exciting time with classics such as Jurassic Park, James Bond's GoldenEye, Mission Impossible, and yes, even Star Wars The Phantom Menace. Even when we couldn't go out to the cinemas, we'd rent VHS tapes of 80s blockbusters like Terminator 2, Indiana Jones, and even The Goonies. It's amazing the amount of creativity that was brought to us through the silver screen, films that defined a decade. Fast forward to today, and we have, Deadpool and Wolverine, and Twisters? What? Why? I'm sure you probably noticed the dire state we're in when it comes to the modern movie-going experience. Hollywood is not doing anyone favours by pumping billions into movies that do poorly in the box office, produced by pencil pushers who have the creativity of a walnut. It's gone to the point now where local theatres have started rescreening older films. Even communities that are situated in smaller towns and cities have resorted to organising outdoor cinema events, where everyone gets together to enjoy a classic film from their heyday. Funnily enough, they're actually doing one of these outdoor screenings on this very beach, as the film of choice happens to be one of my personal favourites. Takeshi Kitano's Kikujiro. A rose movie that follows Masu, a young lad who goes on a journey across rural Japan to find his long-lost mother. Joining him is the titular character, Kikujiro, a middle-aged delinquent who's rough around the edges but does his best to take care of the boy who is put into his care. Along the way, the unlikely pair end up coming across all kinds of interesting characters, crazy misadventures, and indulge in some wacky hijinks. A fun comedy adventure with a lot of heart behind it. So today on Dark Discovers, I'll take a look at a Japanese classic and explain why it's my favourite movie of the summer season. We should probably start by taking a quick look at the career of Kikujiro's director. Famous comedian, actor, writer, director, painter, tap dancer, and game designer, Beat Takeshi, aka Takeshi Kitano. He is probably one of the most prolific directors in Japan, up there with the greats like Akira Kurosawa, Hayao Miyazaki, and Takashi Miike. I'm sure a lot of you know him for his more heavier and serious material, especially in the realm of the Yakuza genre. Violent Cop, Boiling Point, Sonatine, the Outrage trilogy, and my favourite, Hanabi. A lot of these works would inspire a lot of creatives in the future, the Yakuza Like a Dragon franchise being a good example. In fact, if you played Yakuza 6, you probably recognise Kitano in the role of Yakuza patriarch Toru Hirose. His other acting credits include Sergeant Gengo Hara in Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, Kitano in Battle Royale, Takahashi in Johnny Mnemonic. Wow, I can't believe I remember that film. I mean, that's a one-off Western film, there's no way he'd appear in another— oh no. He's in the live-action Ghost in the Shell too? If you watched my previous videos, you probably noticed me bringing up his name quite a few times. This isn't just because I'm a big fan, but it also really goes to show how influential the man is in Japanese culture. Even today, when I do research for an upcoming video, I'd be pleasantly surprised to see his name pop up again, so it's only a matter of time until I start covering his work for real. But what I noticed over the course of his film career is that fans of his work, or the general audience, either forgot or didn't even know that he started off as a comedian. He was one half of the Manzai duo, the Two Beats, working under the stage name of Beat Takeshi, alongside his partner, Beat Kiyoshi. Manzai is best described as a double act for stand-up comedy, where a straight man and funny man often trade jokes with each other at a quick pace. He wrote about his experience growing up in the comedy scene in his memoir, Asukasa Kid, which got a film adaptation in 2021 that was released worldwide on Netflix. So if you're interested to learn more about that part of his life, I recommend checking it out. My first exposure to him was the classic game show and human torture simulator, Takeshi's Castle. I mean, you'd have to have an insane sense of humour to be involved in that show. What surprised me years later was learning that Count Takeshi went on to have a successful directing career. So Manzai, of course, is what could be thought of as Japanese stand-up comedy in the United States. Maybe stand-up is often done by just one person, or there are also the forms, for example. You know, groups such as Abbott and Costello, and these combinations as well. In Japan also, of course, this is usually done with the sound combination format as well. But actually, Manzai, this kind of Japanese comedy, was perhaps the easiest form of entertainment to actually get into to become involved in. But when I think about it now, Manzai is something almost like a sport. You need to be like an athlete to be able to do this. You need a lot of physical energy in order to keep up. So this is something which only you can really do when you are younger. This is why when I passed around 40, I started to think or feel that my mind and body were not necessarily able to keep up with that. So I decided to try my hand at filmmaking from there. As from film, I also became involved in other different forms of work as well. Despite diverting his career into the world of filmmaking, you can actually see a lot of his comedic stylings in the DNA of his work. Sure, some of it is dark humour, but he also doesn't shy away from his dry wit, surrealism and slapstick comedy. In fact, every few years he returns to his roots by directing a few comedy films like Getting Any, Glory to the Filmmaker, and Ryuzo and the Seven Henchmen. But over the course of the 90s, most of his films were serious dramas, some of them dealing with dark and nihilistic themes. After the 1997 crime drama, Hanabi, or Fireworks as it's known in the West, Kitano decided that his next movie should be radically different from his previous works. After Hanabi, I couldn't help feeling that my films were being stereotyped. Gangster, violence, life and death. It became difficult for me to identify with them, so I decided to try and make a film no one would expect from me. To tell the truth, the story of this film belongs to a genre which is outside my specialty. But I decided to make this film because it would be a challenge for me to cope with this ordinary story and try to make it my very own through my direction. And I tried a lot of experiments with imagery. I think it ended up being a very strange film, with my trademark all over it. I hope to continue upsetting people's expectations in a positive way. What's quite amusing about these comments is that he revisits these thoughts in the 2007 comedy Glory to the Filmmaker. It's the second part of Kitano's autobiographical trilogy that takes a look at his career as an actor, director and artist. When you look over his filmography, you can actually tell which points where he got burnt out from his usual fare and decided to make a film that's completely out of left field. Kitano's next entry, Kikujiro, was going to be a summer road movie that's more aimed towards the family-friendly audience. He would not only be sitting in the director's chair, but he would also write the story, co-edit with editor Yoshinori Ota, and star in the film as the titular character, Kikujiro. To co-star alongside Kitano is child actor Yusuke Sekiguchi in the role of Masu, which appears to be his first and only film feature. Other cast includes Kyoko Kishimoto as Kikujiro's wife, Yuko Daiki as Masu's missing mother, Nezumi Imamura as fellow traveller and aspiring writer, Then finally, the great Gideo and Rakio Ide as the bikers are two protagonists meet along the way. What's notable about this supporting cast is that these are actors who worked with Kitano in the past, either in film or in the bikers' case, Takeshi's Castle. Much like with directors such as Quentin Tarantino and Martin Scorsese, Takeshi Kitano has his own camp of actors to rely on because he can always trust them to perform to the best of their abilities. It can be sometimes jarring to see the same actor pop up in a different film of his, but I think it's a really good display of their acting talent, especially when they're playing a completely different character than before. Cinematography would be done by longtime collaborator Katsumi Yanagishima. Aside from Kitano films, he also worked on Battle Royale and the 2006 sequel to the American adaptation of the Ju-On franchise, The Grudge. Filming took place across the Shizuoka and Aichi prefectures, with a few other locations in between, all of them taking full advantage of the beautiful scenery you'll be treated to throughout the film. The soundtrack itself would be scored by none other than legendary composer Joe Hisaishi, recognised worldwide for his work with Studio Ghibli, but he's also a frequent collaborator on Kitano's works as well. Usually, Kitano leaves the soundtrack up to Hisaishi because, and I quote, "it's not my specialty." Most of the time he'd request adjustments after listening to a demo. This time, however, Kitano had something more specific in mind, asking for something along the lines of a lyrical piano piece, and this request was made way before they even started making the movie. The film's main theme, Summer, is probably one of the most iconic pieces of music, not just in Japanese culture, but worldwide too. When you hear these first few notes, I can guarantee you that you probably heard it before, and there's a good chance it's not from the movie the music was originally made for. The theme itself does exactly what it says on the tin. It perfectly encapsulates the summer season, and most impressively, able to invoke a lot of sentimentality. Not only is it an uplifting piece of music, but there's a thin air of sadness to it as well, a sort of bittersweetness, as if it's telling you to enjoy summer while it lasts. A theme that represents the beginning, middle and end of the season, forever timeless. What's even more surprising is that it wasn't supposed to be the main theme. It was originally written by Hisaishi to be a sub-theme, but Kitano liked it so much it became the iconic theme of the movie. It was so well received that it was used as a backing track for television and radio commercials. Over in the West, a lot of people's first exposure to the theme was through the legacy site You're the Man Now Dog, of which a different rendition of the theme, Riverside, was playing over, well, this. Look, the internet was a wild time back then. The film was first screened at the Cannes Film Festival in France on May 20th, 1999. Not only did the film get a standing ovation, it also got the nomination for Best Picture. It then saw a Japanese release a month later on June 5th. Following that, it made the rounds in the Toronto Film Festival on September 14th. Eventually it made its worldwide release in the 2000s. Oh, and I guess China got it September 25th, 2020. I remember when it was first released here, it had a mixed reception. A lot of people who were used to Kitano's output were somewhat put off by the film's more light-hearted tone. When I started getting into foreign films, a couple of film buff friends of mine would recommend a lot of Kitano's works, but when the subject of Kikujiro was brought up, they'd tell me, skip it, it's disjointed, the humour is weird, and it doesn't really make much sense. But in hindsight, I chalk that up to the general audience not fully understanding Kitano's vision for the story he wanted to tell, and fortunately as the years went by, the film became a lot more beloved, with a lot of people calling it a masterpiece, myself included. So let's take a look at this film and explore its story, themes and characters, while celebrating its merits, and ultimately see why it's considered a timeless classic. The film opens on a child who we presume is running home. He's wearing a Hawaiian shirt with an angel wings blue bag on his back. We hear a slight jingle in the background, and if you pay close attention you can see a bell attached to his straps. As he runs off into the distance, The screen fades to black. It's a very quick scene that establishes who we're going to be following throughout this story. There is actually a lot of significance to this scene, but we won't find out till the very end. The movie starts off for real when we see two boys heading home from school. It's here we're fully introduced to our main character, Masu. He and his friend Yuji are enjoying the start of their summer vacation. The first 5 minutes does a great job establishing the calming and light-hearted tone that will be prevalent throughout the movie. As the children run across town enjoying their newfound freedom, we also get a few glimpses of the surrounding area. Wind chimes blowing in the wind, shopkeepers sitting outside by their wares, and people enjoying the sights. The summertime season has arrived. Joe Hisashi's score really sells a feeling of youth in the summertime. It has an upbeat and whimsical tone to it, as if you're about to go on an adventure. But as the two friends part, Maso heads home alone, and as the music winds down, the excitement eventually wears off. As the boy heads home, he comes across his grandmother's friends, a lady and her delinquent husband, Kikujiro. They share some small talk and Masu continues to head home, of which Kikujiro comments how gloomy the kid comes off as. His wife informs him that Masu lives with his grandmother, while his father has long passed, and his mother is working far away from home. From here on out we see Masu on his own. His grandmother isn't even home to welcome him since she's at work. The next few scenes work in contrast to his introduction. A lot of them linger on his seclusion, painting Masu's life in a much more sadder and lonelier light. Despite the overall film being jovial in nature, there is actually a lot of sad undertones that's very easy to miss first time round. Right from the start, Yuji asks Masu his plans for the summer. Masu quickly deflects and asks the same question in return. Yuji answers that he's visiting his father's hometown by the sea, of which Masu remarks how lucky his friend is. It's a quick interaction, but we already get a small hint that Masu isn't as fortunate as other children. When he observes other families, it's from a distance, pretty much hammering home the feeling of isolation. One day, Masu discovers pictures of his parents along with the address of his mother, and makes the bold decision to travel to the city of Toyohashi where she resides. As Masu embarks on his own little adventure, Joe Hisashi's summer is heard playing over the scene. Much like the song, Masu is inspired and energized. He's excited to see the outside world. I'm sure a lot of us around that age fantasized about traveling alone to the beach or the countryside just for the love of the adventure. You know, before the dark days. Before the internet became a thing. While watching him run, it reminds me of a behind the scenes story. During one scene, Masu's actor, Yusuke Sekiguchi, actually had trouble running. According to Kitano, it came off as too forced and unnatural. So in between takes, Kitano tells Yusuke, "That shop over there sells ice cream. I'll give you some money if you run over there and buy some for me." Of which Yusuke bolted over like no tomorrow, and Kitano told the crew to roll the camera. Of course, this uplifting moment doesn't last long as he's quickly stopped by a bunch of delinquent youths demanding to hand over his money. But fortunately, he's saved by Kikujiro and his wife. We cut to the three of them at a bar where the husband and wife learn of Masu's intent to find his long-lost mother. While the wife is very sympathetic towards Masu's cause, she rightly points out that he shouldn't be travelling so far away all by himself at his age, while listing the many flaws in his plan. I actually appreciate the way she treats Masu in this scene. Despite the scolding, she's not really talking down or belittling him. She explains as clearly as she can to her child the dangers that lie ahead of him, pretty much looking out for his well-being. As I'll touch upon later, a lot of the adults Masu comes across in this journey treat him the same way, all of them sharing the same motivation. After the wife tells Masu that someone should go with him, the film slowly cuts to Masu standing next to Kikujiro. I really love how they hang on this scene for longer than they should. It's as if the movie is telling you, yes, these are our two main characters, get used to it. We should be looking at the beginnings of a whimsical summer adventure, but the looks on their faces just say it all. Can you imagine an adventure film where the heroes gather to embark on an epic quest, then the camera turns to these people, They really don't look like the type who are up for an exciting journey. The wife gives Kikujiro the money for the trip, and instructs him to take Masu directly to his mother's residence. The biggest stipulation is, no fooling around. So with all the pieces set up, we're ready to go on this grand adventure. Only to cut to Kikujiro placing bets at the racecourse. This is where the comedy starts coming into play. It's an amusing segment where Kikujiro is asking Masu on which races to bet on, which nets them a few lucky wins. The old man got so hyped up that he managed to get Masu fitted in a jockey outfit. You'd think a comedy sketch like this will be detrimental to the plot and its pacing, but it works really well at not only introducing us to Kikujiro's personality, but the dynamic that's shared between he and Masu. It's a nice bit of character building. The character of Kikujiro was named after Takeshi Kitano's own father. A lot of this story was inspired by their relationship. Kitano described him as a hard-working but violent man, who may or may not have had connections to the Yakuza, and you can see a lot of these influences in his performance. From first impressions, Kikujiro is a bit of a bum. He's irresponsible, abrasive, and holds a few violent tendencies. But throughout this scene, he's still treating Masu as nicely as someone of his demeanour can be. At this point, he's kind of treating him like his very own sidekick. We also begin to see hints of how both characters cope with adversity. Kikujiro is aggressive and angry, while Masu is more withdrawn and sad. Their personalities are opposite in nature, but what's more surprising is that they never clashed with each other. Instead, we're seeing the beginnings of an unlikely friendship. With all these fun shenanigans, it's not too long till the sadness creeps back in. After losing most of the money to a couple of failed bets, Kikujiro sulks at the local yakitori, while Masu is sadly left outside. To make matters worse, Masu has a close call with Mr. Stranger Danger, but fortunately Kikujiro steps in to save the day. It's quite a heavy scene, which I'm obviously cutting down just to keep things light, but Kitano was able to alleviate it with his sense of humour. The audience not only gets the satisfaction of watching this creep get beaten up and thoroughly humiliated, but it also establishes that, for all his flaws, Kikujiro is a generally good person. It's this one moment that becomes a huge turning point for the character, and he now makes it his mission to not only reunite the boy with his mother, but to protect him from any possible danger that might be imposed on them. It's from here on out the journey finally begins. Now I know it's a bit of a slow burn. The first half an hour is establishing the mood, the premise, and our characters, but trust me when I say there's still a lot to take away from those first few minutes. Now that we have a good understanding of our two main characters, we're now free to enjoy their adventure. What awaits is a journey filled with fun and excitement, where we watch our duo figure out how to get from A to B on a shoestring budget while dealing with a couple of misadventures along the way. The perfect road movie where you, the audience, feel like you're going on a summer trip alongside Kikujiro and Masu. While the more sadder undertones continue to be prevalent across this journey, Kitano contrasts this not just with comedy, but by presenting a serene and relaxing atmosphere. There's a lot of beautiful shots throughout this movie that's accompanied by Joe Hisashi's wonderful soundtrack. It really helps you forget about your worries for the next 2 hours. Speaking of which, I feel like I'm supposed to say something at this point in the video. Something about liking a subscription? Or was it ringing that bell? I'm sure it'll come back to me later. Of course, it isn't all fun and games. Along the way, the pair has the unfortunate habit of encountering a few curveballs. Oh!
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry!
I'm not even near the court! How was that possible? Most of these encounters are definitely quite fantastical and not something you'd come across normally in your day-to-day life. I really love the running joke of the many ridiculous schemes they come up with just to hitch a free ride. From taking advantage of Masu's innocent nature, to pulling off wacky hijinks straight out of a Looney Tunes cartoon. Yet despite how preposterous these predicaments are, Kitano was able to make them grounded enough without it going too over the line. Compared to his other comedies, he's actually a lot more reserved here when it comes to his humour, and I think that's for the best. It strikes a good balance with the overall tone, themes and narrative. When the composer, Joe Hisaishi, started writing the soundtrack, he was concerned by the amount of comedy that's involved in the film, but much to his surprise, Kitano instructed him to score the more sorrowful music over some of the comedic scenes. It wasn't until Asashi saw the grief Kikujiro and Masu were coping with that he finally understood what Kitano was going for. Most of the score is very uplifting, but like I said before when talking about the main theme, Summer, you can hear a slight sad undertone, especially when it comes to its use of piano or violins. Again, it's not just the perfect soundtrack for the story Kitano wanted to tell, but the perfect soundtrack for the summer, and it always plays in my head whenever the season arrives. Another aspect that's present throughout the film is its use of surrealism. Kitano cited The Wizard of Oz as one of his inspirations for the story, and you can see it not just through its dreamlike presentation, but its eccentric characters as well. One thing that should be noted is that all the characters we meet along the way are societal outcasts one way or another. We're even introduced to this theme in the first few minutes, where Masu and Yuji stop before a group of delinquents and decided it's best to avoid them. Even Masu himself could be considered an outcast because of his absentee parents. But when it comes to meeting these oddball strangers on the journey, it's actually very touching to see how they treat Masu with a lot of care, even going out of their way to lift his spirits. It's incredibly heartwarming. Every one of these strangers have distinct and memorable personalities. For the short time you're with them, you're left off with a very positive impression, and it's really bittersweet when they have to eventually part ways with our main characters. I'm sure there's quite a few people who had similar experiences on their travels where they meet someone going along the same path, and you have such a good time with each other's company that it could be tough saying goodbye. There's even a chance you won't see that person again, and this film does a really good job evoking those emotions. With Masu being at the centre of this story, since this is his journey after all, you're probably wondering why the film is named Kikujiro. Well, that's because we're watching this story unfold through Masu's perspective, a detail that I'm surprised that a lot of critics at the time completely missed out on. The story is told through vignettes. Each of them opens at a page of Masu's schoolbook, as if he's journaling his entire experience for homework. We actually see him at one point studying, so it's not outside the realm of possibility to believe that the events we're watching unfold are from the pages of a child's vacation diary. The larger-than-life characters and crazy situations that Masu comes across can be attributed to his hyperactive imagination. It certainly plays into those Wizard of Oz inspirations, where the audience is left wondering if the events Dorothy experienced was a dream or not. There's some very dedicated people out there who managed to map out the entire route from the starting point of the film all the way to Toyohashi, and noted that, under normal circumstances, the journey shouldn't take as much time to get to the city as the film is depicting it, but again, we're seeing this through the eyes of a child, so their perspective of time is a lot slower compared to an adult. We're observing Kikujiro through Masu's point of view. He's our audience surrogate. Kikujiro himself is the vehicle for the story. In the beginning, the old man had a somewhat scary vibe to him, which is a given because meeting strangers can be quite a daunting thing for a child, but over the course of the story, we and Masu grow to like him. Funny enough, we don't learn that his name is Kikujiro till the very end.
Oh, that's why they call it that.
Up to that point, Masu referred to him as Mr., and I personally think it's a very meaningful way to end the story for us to finally learn his name. The heart of the movie is the relationship between Kikujiro and Masu. We're travelling alongside with them. We get to watch their highs and lows. They started off with a shaky alliance, but it eventually develops into a father-son relationship. It's definitely an instance of the journey being more important than the destination, both figuratively and literally. A little over the halfway mark in the film, they do reach the residence of Masu's mother, and without spoiling anything, they're met with a heartbreaking revelation. It marks another turning point, not just for Kikujiro, but for Masu as well, as the rest of the story is focused on giving Masu the best summer holiday a kid can ever have. This third act is actually my favourite part of the film. After reaching their destination, they reunite with one of the people who helped them on their journey, an inspiring writer who's travelling across Japan in the hopes of finding his own inspiration. When Kikujiro explains the situation to the writer, he suggests that they should set up camp to help raise Masu's spirits. Eventually, they're also joined by two bikers, Fatty and Baldy, who Kikujiro met previously as well. Together, they go out of their way to give Masu the authentic summer camp experience. This ranges from playing games, goofing off, enjoying some watermelon by the riverside, and dressing up as a range of ridiculous characters. There's a lot of fun to be had throughout these scenes, and a lot of Kitano's sense of humour shines brightly here, but what's more important is that those sad undertones that were present throughout the movie are slowly fading away, which works in conjunction with Masu's mindset. It may not be a theme park, a fancy resort, or a family gathering, but it's the people and the adventures you take that help make a summer holiday oh so memorable.
打つの早いよ。打っちゃダメだよ。
One of the strongest aspects of this movie that I hold to high regard is its visual storytelling, from its scenery, cinematography, even down to the minute details. There's actually a lot of visual cues that foreshadow future events, tiny little setups that pay off much later in the story. Despite the language barrier, I still feel like you get a good understanding of what's transpiring on screen. It's probably why it did so well in France and Europe in general. The visual language on display is very much universal. I especially have to praise the way the film presents its character arcs. For most of the story, Masu is a silent protagonist, but thanks to Yusuke Sekiguchi's performance, you can see how much of a burden he carries on his shoulders. He's very quiet, withdrawn, and lacking in self-confidence. His sadness and uncertainty is always trailing behind him. You can pretty much feel it throughout his body language. There are dream sequences that are sparsely placed throughout the story that are symbolic of Masu's mental state. Most of them are vivid and intense, all of them reflecting the events of the day before. Their imagery evokes a lot of negative and scary emotions within Masu. However, when it comes to the final dream sequence, it's the opposite. It's incredibly uplifting and imaginative. The people who appear in the dream are the same ones who lifted his mood and gave him hope. It's quite simple on paper, but thanks to its presentation, it's incredibly impactful. Meanwhile, we have the mysterious Kikujiro. All we have to work with is his personality, which makes sense if we're viewing him through Masu's point of view. The film doesn't outright tell us his backstory, but thanks to a few visual clues, we can somewhat piece together who he was in the past and why he is the way he is today. Towards the end, Kikujiro decides to visit his own mother at a care home. Once you watch that scene, you'll begin to understand his motivations and why he relates to Masu so well. Takeshi Kitano drew a lot from his relationship with his father, and I appreciate how he plays the role straight for most of the film. Even during his more goofier moments, you get the feeling that his actions make sense to him and him alone. Despite coming off as a bit of a bum who walks about like a yakuza, he still shows bouts of compassion and warmth towards Masu. There are scenes where you can tell Kitano is ad-libbing, especially when he's trying to get a reaction out of his co-star. Just like Kikujiro is trying to keep Masu happy, Kitano is making sure Yusuke has a fun experience on set, and you can tell it works because both of them give an excellent performance and their chemistry is on point. You end up rooting for the two to find their happiness, and when their arcs come to a satisfying conclusion, you see their journey change them for the better. The film comes full circle when it replays the first scene, only this time we now understand its context. The film ends on an uplifting and optimistic note, a stark difference from the ending of Kitano's previous films, and it never fails to brighten my day whenever I rewatch it with friends. The story of this film doesn't exactly end here though, because there's a really cool documentary by the name of Jam Session, the official bootleg of Kikujiro, directed by filmmaker and critic Shinzozaki Makoto. It's a really detailed look at how Takeshi Kitano directs one of his movies, from the shooting, the editing, all the way to its first screening. Because he likes to shoot his film in sequence, we're actually following the events of the story chronologically, only this time we're watching it through all the outtakes and deleted scenes, a different perspective so to speak. This is why the documentary is referred to as the official bootleg. It's a really cool idea and I wish more directors did this. It adds a lot more value to the film, especially if you're already a fan of it to begin with. It's something I highly recommend watching, especially for any aspiring filmmakers, because they do go very in-depth in the creative process, and it's very interesting to watch how Kitano approaches the role as both director and main actor. If you've seen the excellent behind-the-scenes documentaries of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, produced by Robert Meyer Burnett, I'd say Jam Session is quite up there, only on a more smaller scale. Most impressively, much like its film counterpart, the documentary also captures that uplifting feeling of being on a summer vacation. Everyone, from the actors, the extras and the film crew, all looks like they were having the time of their lives on set, and you can see that reflected so well in the movie itself. If you pay extra attention, there's quite a few moments where you can actually see the actors crack up, especially during the more absurd scenes. One of the more notable examples was the scene where Kikujiro was beating up the sex pest and outright humiliating him. It was such a ridiculous scene that everyone on set couldn't hold it together. And then during the very next day, Kitano had to admit that he ended up with some very strange dreams because of it.
マロさんのことは夢に出てきて、マロさんが相変わらずパンツ脱がしてんだよ。驚いたら笑っちゃって夢から覚めてゲラゲラ笑ってひどいシーンだったんだけど。
What also definitely helps is how a lot of the cast are regulars of Takeshi Kitano's work. And to go that extra mile, there's even a cameo from Kitano's comedy partner and second half of the two beats, Kiyoshi Kaneko, aka Beat Kiyoshi. He plays a random guy that joins the pair at a bus stop, and suddenly the scene itself becomes a man's-eye comedy routine. It's really funny watching them throw barbs at each other so fast and so loosely. And God bless Yusuke here, he's trying so hard not to crack up at this. Of course, it gets a lot harder for everyone to keep a straight face when the third act comes into play, with Kitano throwing a lot of crazy scenarios at the cast. The great Kidayu, as Rakio Ide, who play bikers Fatty and Baldy, are also regulars of Takeshi Kitano's work. My first exposure to them happened to be Takeshi's Castle, so it makes sense for them to go along with whatever crazy idea that would pop in the director's head. I honestly believe they're one of the highlights of the movie. The lengths their characters have to go through just to give this kid the best vacation is very heartwarming, even if it means they have to pretend to be watermelons. I can't begin to tell you how much this single shot messes me up. It's either the lengths Baldy goes through to become a watermelon, even slapping a sticker on his head to complete the look, or both Rikayo Ide and Nezumi Mamura trying so hard not to crack up. I feel like there's so much more to this than what's being said, and as the saying goes, every frame's a painting. I have to give extra credit to Rakio Ide, who had to put up with so many ridiculous costumes and makeup. At one point he even had to run about naked, and I'm not even sure if that was his decision or not, but that's a lot of dedication, I'll give him that. There's so much love and passion that went into making this film, and it was birthed from a director who just wanted to try something completely new. The concept may seem simple enough on paper. Kitano himself admitted it was an ordinary story, but its execution and presentation is what makes it very special. What Kitano was able to do is encapsulate the feeling of childlike wonder during the warm summer season, and most importantly, make it a timeless classic. Now, is there an example of taking this concept and poorly executing it? Well actually, yeah, there is. Mr. Bean's Holiday, yeah I know, stick with me here. Mr. Bean's Holiday is a 2007 comedy film where our titular character, Mr. Bean, wins a vacation to the French city of Cannes, but thanks to his own tomfoolery, he managed to separate a young boy named Stefan from his father, and now Mr. Bean is travelling across France with the goal of reuniting Stefan with his dad. If you know Mr. Bean, then you pretty much expect the same kind of slapstick humour. Much like with Kikujiro, the language of the film is also quite universal. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the same heart. In fact, I'm daring to say the film is quite mid. As someone who grew up with the original TV series, I remember being excited to see this movie. To see Mr. Bean's co-creator and star, Rowan Atkinson, return one last time wasn't something I wasn't going to pass up. Instead, I came out of the theatre with a blank look on my face while thinking, it was okay? I think? Then days later I completely forgot what happens in the film. Despite there being one or two funny moments, there wasn't really much substance to the overall story. I know it sounds like I'm expecting more from a Mr. Bean movie, and trust me, I didn't go into the theatre expecting something grand like a Scorsese movie, but I would at least expect some effort behind it. There were some decent moments, and Atkinson didn't certainly miss a beat when it comes to playing the role that made him famous, but overall it's a forgettable experience. It's like an aging rock star who decided to make a comeback but doesn't have that spark anymore. A Rose movie featuring a man-child such as Mr. Bean having to travel with some random kid is a hilarious premise, but it felt like a lot of the jokes and sketches came first, and the thing excuse for a plot came last. Whereas in Kikujiro, the comedy was working in conjunction with its story. What doesn't help is that you can tell they were trying to go for a Mr. Bean's greatest hits type film, but the scenes they try to replicate don't hold up to the original. Honestly, the more I think about it now, the more frustrating it becomes. It's really disappointing, especially since it was supposed to be the swan song to Rowan Atkinson's time as Mr. Bean, but as we'll discover years later, he'd returned to the role for the official Mr. Bean YouTube channel. Before you ask, no, I didn't edit this for a haha funny moment. This was actually left up on the official YouTube. Honestly, if you want a better product that takes full advantage of Rowan Atkinson's comedic stylings, backed up with an excellent script, I recommend the 2022 Netflix miniseries Man vs. Bee. Despite its silly title, it has a lot of hearts that Mr. Bean's holiday was severely lacking in. Kikujiro is an uplifting and optimistic movie that doesn't shy away from the sorrows of being an outcast. We're watching two castaways who go on a journey together through the summer, and come out with a better outlook in life. A timeless tale that encapsulates the feeling of youth, the call for adventure, and most importantly, the magic of the summer season. It's one of the rarest times where I could call a film beautiful, and I don't think there's anything out there that's quite like it. It's available worldwide on DVD and Blu-ray. The latter actually comes with a 90-minute documentary, Jam Session. You can also listen to the amazing soundtrack composed by Joe Hasashi on streaming sites like Spotify, Apple Music, and even YouTube Music, and it looks like you can buy the physical copy on Amazon. If you just want to escape for the next 2 hours, especially during the bustling heat of the summertime, then grab a few cold drinks, maybe some ice cream, and treat yourself to this wonderful film. So what has Takeshi Kitano been up to since Kikujiro? Well, just about everything actually. Aside from working in film and comedy, as well as appearing in Yakuza 6 of all things, he's also a painter. You can actually see his art in the beginning of Kikujiro. His earlier works were already considered art house film, so he already had an established audience who were very much interested in his artwork, and eventually they would end up in art exhibitions in Paris. He also stepped up into the world of TV dramas where he produced the 2003 series Kikujiro and Saki, which were based on his memoir of the same name. There was also a 2001 TV movie, but I don't believe he was as involved. It pretty much goes into his childhood and his relationship with his parents. So if you want to see a bit more inspiration behind the film and the titular character Kikujiro, I'd say it's worth taking a gander if you can. His work in TV doesn't end there, because he appeared in a special episode of the excellent medical drama Dr. X. Despite his status, he fits in with the cast really well, and his character is incredibly intriguing. It's also a bit of a treat for me because I get to see one of my favourite actresses, Ryoko Yunakura, perform with one of my favourite directors, and they share some great scenes together. On top of that, the actress who played Kikujiro's wife, Kyoko Kishimoto, also makes a special appearance too. Even when it's not a Kitano production, the two can't seem to stay away from each other. Since the release of Kikujiro, He did hit into a bit of a rut when his next two films, Brother and Dolls, weren't as received as well, but thanks to the 2003 action film, Satoshi the Blind Swordsman, he was able to get back into top form, even producing two excellent film trilogies, one of them being the Outrage trilogy, which I highly recommend to this day. However, if you want to understand his creative mindset, then I think you should also check out his surrealist autobiographical trilogy that consists of the 2005 thriller, Takeshi's, followed by the 2007 comedy, Glory to the Filmmaker, and concluding with 2008's Achilles and the Tortoise, each of them focusing on a different aspect of his creative career. I especially wanted to focus on the second movie that's a reflection of his directorial work. There's a scene between Rakio Ide and Takeshi Kitano that's a direct nod towards Kikujiro, and by direct I mean Ide straight up says, "Hey Takeshi, this is just like Kikujiro. Remember that? Remember when you made me dress up as an alien?" It really comes off as an outtake, but Kitano just decided to leave it in because it fits with the film's meta-narrative. I'm honestly happy a scene like this is still in here, because it goes to show how much of a positive impact Kikujiro was to everyone that worked on the film. In 2023, he released the historical samurai drama, Kyubi, of which he's in the role of writer, director and editor once again. A movie that was 30 years in the making. Its concept was conceived around the same time Sonatine was made, and I do remember him mentioning that he was working on it on and off. The reason why it took so long was because he needed time, not just to prepare, but to gather the best actors he had the privilege to work with over the decades all together in this one piece. However, its release completely blindsided me. I was so focused on other films of that year, like Shin Kamen Rider and Revolver Lily, that I didn't believe the film would actually come out. As I looked more into it, it appears there was a contract dispute with the film's publisher, Kadokawa, of which Kitano halted production until his cast and crew were paid fairly. It definitely looked like Kadokawa were up to some shady dealings behind his back, but I'm glad he stood his ground and managed to get the film out eventually. Despite his age, I'm still happy to see him continue to be active in the filmmaking world. He's a very spontaneous and unpredictable guy, but that's what makes him and his work stand out so strong. A creator who's in it for the art, always pushing himself to create something that he and his crew would be proud of. I honestly don't think there's anyone like him, and I think we're lucky to have a director of his stature who is still able to create masterpieces like Kikujiro. To be honest, I think with all the different things I try, perhaps I wasn't necessarily so good at any of them. So I just kept trying different methods, different forms of art, and searching for the form that would match or fit myself in the best way from them. And that's kind of what led me to where I am today. But to be very honest, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm particularly satisfied with my own work, till now. Thank you for watching this episode of Doc Discovers. It's probably a bit shorter compared to before, but I didn't want to waste your time. There's a lot to the film I purposely left out because, well, I wanted you to watch it yourself. But if you've already seen it, let me know your thoughts down below. Maybe share your own experience watching this movie. Either way, I, as usual, appreciate you taking the time to watch this. Next time on Doc Discovers, we take a look at a Japanese comedian who goes on his own summer vacation to the hell state known as Los Angeles. The only stipulation is that he has to recreate the 1997 James Cameron movie, Titanic, where he has to co-star alongside his best friend's mother. But until next time, I think I'll just hang back and enjoy the weather. I'm sure the rest of you have your own vacation plans. You know, instead of being indoors and watching some bloke talk about a Japanese film from the 90s. Oh, yeah. Be sure to like and subscribe.